sore, aman nggak? Hello, everybody. Welcome to America. My name is Hasna, one of the guests here in America. For those of you who are new here and have no idea what America is, America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center, and our mission is to provide a space for young Indonesians to learn about the United States. And yes, we are currently open for visitors every day. So come visit us at America Jakarta to explore our events, experience our facilities, and express yourself. In this episode, we will have the GED test preparation, reasoning through language arts series week 4, analyzing nonfiction and informational text. But before we begin, we have a little trivia for you, and the trivia for today is test takers will get a 10-minute break between parts 2 and 3 in the exam of reasoning through language arts. That was the trivia of the day. You can also share your own trivia to our social media platform regarding to our events today. And now, without further ado, let me invite the GED qualified instructor, Zakaria. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And welcome everyone to another session of GED prep class, Reasoning Through Language Arts by Us America. And without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. And I hope you are able to see it. I hope you are. Yes, as I can see, you can see my screen. Great. Okay, this is session 7. And in the last 6 sessions, we have talked about reading and also analyzing. And this is also, again, the last session of nonfiction texts. And in this session, we are going to talk about analyzing nonfiction. I'm going to do a bit of review in the end about the nonfiction text in general, and I'm going to also give you some tips and teach you some tricks. Anyway, so let's go. The questions on Mentimeter. I noticed that one of the questions was that whether students at the end of this GED program will get a voucher for the hourly exam. So again, maybe a person who asked this question is new. If you are new to this, if you have at the end of the 16 sessions, if you attend 12 out of the 16 sessions, you get a practice test voucher, which will show you, which is a GED ready test, which will show you how ready you are and what areas you need to work on and what improvements you need to make. A bit of recap. So in the beginning, we talked about reading comprehension. We talked about what it means, basically understanding a text, either nonfiction or fiction, after reading it. So we talked about close reading. I'm going to talk about all these topics again in the end, so I'm not going to do really comprehensive overview of this right now, but I will review session 6, which was the last session on Thursday. In the last session, we talked about purpose of text, for what purposes any text is written, and there are 3 main. We talked about, we said that, okay, one of the purposes that a text could be written for is to entertain. So the next one, we said, okay, for the purpose of text, so the entertaining purpose is used when the writer, uses imagination, usually through poems. Usually you see this purpose in books, in novels, fiction books, of course. And generally, like movies are written to entertain, basically based on imagination. Anyway, the next one is to inform. As we talked about, this is usually seen, mostly seen, always. I don't want to use the word always. As the other day I talked about generalization and how you should avoid these words. I'm going to use always anyway. Always used in textbooks, used at school, universities, and also, some cookbooks. Anyway, anything that you read and to feel informed. And this is used in non-fiction, usually news, definitely news. And they are not made up. The next one is to persuade. This is a tricky one. So the text that you read and you feel as if you are being told to believe in a certain way, or in a certain thing, or in a certain school of thought, then that means that text is trying to persuade you. Or if you feel after reading a text, okay, this text is trying to stop me from believing in this particular thing or in this particular idea. In that situation, that text is trying to dissuade you, kind of stop you from thinking in a certain way or having a certain thought. So when you read, these are basically the 3 purposes that you find in any text: to entertain, to inform, to persuade. Okay, that is for session 6, and Before we go there, and you see the first question, I want you to now open your Mentimeter because in order to get you in the mood of studying and learning, we will have a quick assessment of your understanding from purpose of text. I have just told you for what purposes texts are written, and now it's your turn to go and assess yourself or assess your understanding, and for me to see how much you have understood and whether you need any help from me. So now open your Mentimeter or go to mentimeter.com and enter this code 7532 6538. And when you are there, I'm going to allow you, or I'm going to give you 30 seconds to open it. And after that, I'm going to start this timer and I'll close the voting after 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, and your time starts now. You have 5 minutes. There are 7 slides, I guess. 9, actually. So you read those statements and you choose whether that particular situation or that whatever written about a text, whether that text is about entertaining, informing, or persuading you. Your time starts now. Okay, great. Seems like all of you were able to answer the questions, and now we can go through the answers that you have given. Now let's go to question 1, or maybe statement 1. The statement is that, okay, seems like results are hidden. Why are the results hidden? Let me see if I can maybe fix that. Okay, this is weird. Let me go to the previous one and see if it works in here. Okay, now let's check it here. I'm going to just check it here. So number 1, the statement is that the pamphlet urging people not to eat animals, use products made from animals for animal suffering, because the author thinks that is cruel and unnecessary. So glad to see that most of you got it right. Yes, the purpose of this is not insane, because it's not made up. It's not imaginative work. It's not a novel book. It's not basically a poem. It's a reality, and the author is, making an argument and is trying to stop you from doing something or thinking a certain way. So this is certainly not to inform you as well, and this is to persuade you. The next one is that a book of over 1,000 no jokes. Yep, this one's purpose is to insane. Knock jokes. Jokes are usually made up, not always. So, and now number 3 is a cookbook containing recipes, making cakes, cookies, and other desserts. As I said in the beginning, that if you read something that and you feel as if you are being informed about a topic or about something, about how to do something, you are being instructed. So I think in the previous session we did talk about when authors when they write something, an informational text. So they instruct you, they inform you, they try to teach you something, they try to make you aware of something, and in this case it's teaching, it's instructing. So this is to inform. Next one, the story of a young woman who, after the death of her grandfather, quit her job in the business world and returned home to help her aging grandmother. So now, if you read this, how will you feel? Is this based on a true story, or is this based on, someone's imagination? If this is a true story, and you see it's not a specific, no one's name is mentioned here, so it means that the person being talked about here is not real. So this is imaginative work. This is a novel, maybe. Maybe you read a novel about a young woman who, after the death of her grandfather, goes home to help her grandmother. So this is to entertain. This is to keep you entertained. This is not to inform you about anything. This is not teaching you anything, and this is not certainly persuading you to leave or stop believing in a certain way. I'm glad to see that no one has chosen to persuade. The next one is a politician's speech about how homes should be provided to families who cannot afford them. What do you think? A politician's speech about how homes should be provided to families who cannot afford them. This is not to entertain. Well done for that. To inform, you could say that. So, but if you look at, when you hear politicians speak generally, and this is where you use the making connection strategy that we talked about in session 3, I guess. And we said that, okay, sometimes you'll need to make connections between what you read and the real world. And if you connect this to a real world situation, when politicians, when they try to get votes, they make promises and they talk about, how to do something great and how we should stop doing something else. So this is, how to provide families who cannot, how to provide homes for families who can't afford to have one. So this is to persuade. And the next one is a poem. As soon as you read that, okay, that is to entertain. As soon as you read, oh, it's a poem, oh, to entertain. It's not to inform you. Poems are, yes, they maybe they make you think in a certain way, but they don't really try to make you believe in anything. Poems are imaginative works or imaginary works and made ups, and they are made up. They are made up of someone's thought, someone's imagination, and usually are not based on truth, literally speaking. Anyway, number 7, an article comparing and contrasting American and Swedish healthcare systems. Well done. Yes, this is to inform you. 9 is a young girl's note to her parents, giving reasons. Wow, interesting. This is okay. So a young girl's note to her parents, giving reasons why they should buy a puppy. Okay, as soon as you read that something is written to tell you why you should do something or stop doing something, that text is to persuade you. So in this girl's case, this girl is trying to persuade her parents to buy a puppy. Different reasons. These are the reasons we should buy a puppy. Persuading. This is to persuade. And then the last one, a website describing a local dog leash ordinance, detailing its history and the penalties for walking around with one's dog unleashed. What do you think? To entertain? Certainly not, yes. To inform? To persuade? No. As soon as you read, describe, instruct, inform these things, the purpose of that text is to inform people. In this case, about dog leash ordinance. Ordinance basically means order. So describing a local dog leash order, detailing its history and the penalties for walking around with one's dog unleashed. This is just informing you what penalties are involved if you, walk around with your dog unleashed. So this is to inform you. This is not telling you whether you should unleash or keep your dog leashed. This is just telling you what happens, what the penalties are. This is it. I got through that. Now this way. Okay, in today's session we are going to talk about reading two related texts. Generally, this does not happen during GED test, the RLA, the reading test. So you're not going to read two different texts and find what is related or what are related topics, themes, or graphics among those two texts. Usually, I'm not saying it's never going to happen. Again, gotta make sure the words that I use, the adverbs that I use. So we are going to talk about analyzing two opposing arguments. This is really great for your writing as well. because as we talked about in the beginning, and as you might know by now, by doing your own research, I hope you have been doing your own research about the GED itself, the GED program itself, and also about what is and is not involved in the English RLA test of GED. So what we have learned so far is how to apply them during the test. Is also something we are going to talk about. And let's talk about reading to related texts. As I said, you're not going to be asked to read two different texts. It doesn't really matter what those two texts are, and then there's going to be this is not going to happen. Okay, this has not happened. When I took the test, I did not see any question like this, and no one has reported having seen these types of questions. But what will happen is you are going to be given graphics, two different graphics, maybe talking about the same thing. And texts can be related with their themes as well. Themes is something that we are going to talk about in the fiction section of this program, which is the next session. The next session is going to be focused on reading fiction texts and what to look for and what we are asked to and what we should know about them. So please do not worry about this one. We are going to come back to that. So graphics, as I said in the previous session, that you are going to be given, bars, maybe, no. You are going to be given graphs, or maybe graph bars even, or something like this. That is too cliche, maybe something like this. And you'll have a text here and a text here, and the question is about that graph that you see. That is something that you assume. Maybe you see two graphs and you are asked about, so which one has, for instance, this one, let's say it talks about the year, maybe this here is year, and maybe this one here is population, right? This one is, for instance, this one is about Jakarta, and this one right here is about, for instance, again, this one is population, and this one is year. And you'll see that, okay, great. And this one talks about New York, NYC, New York City. So when you see, you might, find something like this. Maybe I should draw this with a different color. You might see something like this. And there will be a question asking you, okay, in what year did Jakarta have more population growth than New York? No, a question like this. And also you might be asked, okay, in what year did New York have more population than Jakarta? Could be. You'll be maybe in bars, and you'll be asked, okay, so which city has more traffic lights, for instance? And you see the bar is about traffic lights and about two different cities, the same topic. They are related through their theme or main idea. The main idea of one is to talk about the growth, and the main idea or theme of the other one is to talk about growth of population as well. So they are related through their main idea, with their theme or their topics, but they are about two different things, and you will be asked questions about both of them. Again, do not worry if you do not understand what I'm referring to when I say theme, when I say topic. Topic is easy, of course. We did talk about it in the beginning, but theme, that one is a bit more complicated, and you will understand, what theme is. Theme is basically like a main idea. It is not just one certain topic. Theme is like a main idea, but sometimes strictly stated, sometimes intricately stated. Theme is basically when you read something and you're like, okay, what is this author trying to tell me? Or what feeling does it give you? That would be the theme of the text that you read. Anyway, so analyzing two opposing arguments, as I said, this is a really important part of the GED test, because when you know how to read one, by now you should be able to do that. And you know how to analyze, you know how to find out the purpose of a text, you know how to look for evidence, basically you know how to analyze and see what the text is all about, how to comprehend the text. So read the text closely. When you want to analyze, even though it's called reading comprehension, but it's reading to comprehend, reading to understand, and you cannot understand something without analyzing it. So when you read closely, it will help you analyze a text. So read the text closely. What do we mean by read closely? As we said in the beginning, we said that, okay, when we say read something closely, we generally mean that ask questions. So questions like, when you ask questions, well, okay, what is this text about? What is this text about? This question will give you the topic. Okay, the topic of this text is population. Great, you got it. And now the next one is like, what is this text telling me? Meaning that when you read a text, ask yourself, okay, what question is this text answering? Okay, if you could, maybe, it doesn't really matter what text you read. They always answer a question. And once you get that question, and then you'll be able to figure out the main idea. So this is how you can test the main idea, whether you have truly understood the main idea. Among other strategies, this is one of the ways that you can find out whether you have got the main idea right, correctly. So when you say, okay, what is this text telling me? Then you say, okay, this text is telling me to stop, stop walking with my dog unleashed. Okay, so that is the main idea of the text. By the way, this is not about that website's article, because that website was only informing you, telling you what will happen if you walk with your dog unleashed. But what I'm saying is that, so this is why you should not walk with your dog unleashed. This is a different thing. So that will be the main idea. Ask questions like, okay, so this is, for instance, you have got the main idea, and then you ask questions like, okay, is there any statement or is there any evidence presented in the text supporting what I think to be the main idea? Okay, great. So the next one is basically being an active reader basically means read to understand, read while reading. This is a really good strategy. While reading, what you can do is, if you see a number deem it important. So with GED tests, this is, for instance, let's say this is the computer screen. This is where you will see the paragraph. Maybe there is one paragraph, or maybe there are maybe 3 to 4 paragraphs. And on this right side, you will see the question. And in here, you will see the timer and how much time you have left and how many questions you have left. So then, for instance, when the first section of the GED starts, where you have, let's say, 35 questions. And this is your, this question 14, and then you'll see something like this, 14 out of 35. And for instance, you have 15 minutes left. And the timer keeps decreasing. Anyway, this is what you'll see. So when you are reading, while reading, mark the numbers, maybe highlight them. You will have different options. You will have, just by using the mouse of the computer that you will be using during the test. You can use the test portal's highlighter and highlight the parts that you think are important. And when you read the question, look at the question. Is the question something that you need to understand the whole text to answer? Or is it about a specific part of a text? The question might be, let's say, the text is about Einstein. The question is about Albert Einstein. The text is about Albert Einstein, and the question is asking you, so what year did Einstein go to the US? This is not something that you need to understand the whole text to answer. This is specific. Then you go and find that. If the question is, okay, what is the main idea of this text? Then you will know that you need to understand the whole text to answer that question. So read the text based on the question that you are being asked. Anyway, make sure you understand the text. This is important because no matter what the question is, once you have understood the text, you are able to answer any question. Next one. Okay. Oh, I thought there was a question. Next one is find the main ideas of both arguments. As I said, this is really important. When you read, let's say, 2 texts, and they are opposing arguments. When you're reading them, number one, let's say this one talks about why you should keep your dog unleashed while walking outside. This one is about the same topic, but with a different main idea. The main idea of this is, maybe this is a question that I'm asking, maybe if you answer this question, that is the main idea of the test, by the way. That's why I say, okay, when you ask a question, to make sure that you have understood the main idea of the text, and to see whether the whole text is trying to answer that question, that's when you know that the answer of that question is actually the main idea. And this one answers the question why you shouldn't. That one is why you should. And wow, Now this one is for why you shouldn't. This one is arguing why you shouldn't keep your dog unleashed while walking outside, and the previous one, let's name them maybe. This is text number 1, and this is text number 2. So text number 1 argues why you should not leash your dog, or why you should not keep your dog leashed while walking outside. And text 2 argues that why you should do this, or why you shouldn't keep your dog unleashed. So now you have read these two texts, and you have to find out. Yeah, the good thing about, by the way, the good thing about reading two different texts, opposing texts arguing about the same topic, they have opposing main ideas. The good thing is that once you understand one text's main idea, you understand the other text's main idea as well, because the other text's main idea is the opposite of the one that you have understood. So now let's say you read this and you are confused. Okay, what is this text about? What is this text really saying? And you read this and you're like, oh, this must be the opposite of this. This is really great for the writing section, because in the writing section you will read two opposing arguments, and you ask for, so basically you are asked to find out which one is the better support argument and write your extended response to that. Okay, that is that. Maybe I should erase this. You might have started thinking about dogs, and that should not happen during this. Just think about GED. Anyway, so look for evidence presented in each argument. Meaning, we know the types of evidence. We know which ones are, more important or more valid or more credible. When you read any text, look for evidence and find out which one has more credible evidence. Credible meaning which one is more accepted, more reliable. For instance, you read about this, the one that, maybe I should just write the 1 and 2. So in text number 1, you have, for instance, you said, okay, I said that while reading, you can use highlight and highlight parts of the text that you think are important. You have highlighted, for instance, let me use a highlight here as well. Maybe you can use, and you are free not to. You can use maybe green to maybe highlight the parts that you think are evidence and they support the main idea. And this one also. Okay, as you can see, text number 1 has 6 evidence, and text number 2 has 7. That does not mean that text number 2 is more credible or better supported. You should pay close attention to the types of evidence as well. For instance, as I mentioned in session 6, that you could have statistics, the types of evidence, by the way. Statistics, You could have the expert's opinion, either direct quote or paraphrased statements. The expert opinion, you could have examples or anecdotes. You could have okay, that is done, statistics done, logical reasoning. You could also have maybe talking about a research or maybe like a poll that was done recently. So when you see, look for the types of evidence, and you might notice that, okay, later on you might have to maybe kind of mark some of the evidence in one of the texts as invalid. For example, okay, for instance, this text, you're going to say, okay, this text is, in this part of the text, this text has invalid evidence because this evidence here actually disproves that. For instance, the logical reasoning might be used here saying that, okay, unleashed dogs are dangerous for the people walking around. Then there is a statistic that talks about no one has been bitten by an unleashed dog ever. They're like, okay, this has not been done. So why is this person, using logical reasoning and he's saying that, okay, unleashed dogs are dangerous for people walking around? I mean, except for the owner, of course. And then you can actually mark this one as invalid. Pay close attention to the types of evidence and make sure that the evidence that you deem as valid is actually valid and has not been disproven by any of the evidence provided in the other text. Okay, so the next one is look for facts. We know the difference between fact and opinion. We know what a fact is and we know what an opinion is. A fact is a statement that can be either proven or disproven, and an opinion is a statement that can neither be proven nor disproven. And an opinion, of course, can be argued. For instance, my opinion, for instance, I say that, okay, everyone should stop using phone, or everyone in the world should not be allowed to use technology. I don't want to make this controversial statement. Anyway, so anyone in the world should not be allowed to use their phones more than 10 hours a day, even though some people use their phones less than that. But anyway, this is that. As soon as you hear that, that is an opinion. You cannot prove this. You can argue with me. You can say, okay, no, this is not true. This is not reasonable. This is not a valid argument. You can argue with me. I'm just going to say, oh, it's my opinion. To each their own. Let's agree to disagree and all. At the end of the day, you won't be able to either prove or disprove that argument because it's an opinion. Fact is a statement. If I say people use their phone, for instance, I'm going to say people in this area use their phones more than 10 hours a day, or an individual in this area uses their phone more than 10 hours a day. This is a statement, so this is a sentence, an argument, or maybe something someone said that can be proven or disproven. A research can either prove this or disprove this. So that one is a fact. We know that. We don't have to go through that again. Highlight the evidence both for and against each argument. This is something we talked about in the previous slide. So when you read the text and you say the argument, for instance, is that dogs should not be unleashed while walking outside, the evidence might be that 2 people have been bitten by unleashed dogs in the last 3 days. Once you read that, you are, okay, that's an evidence. That is a statistic. And that can be used to, that is used to support this argument, and that can be used to write down your own extended response in the writing section, of course. Anyway, so when you highlight the evidence, maybe the evidence that you find invalid, you can highlight them maybe with red color. The evidence that you find credible, you can highlight them with green color, whatever colors you like. Anyway, during the test, is it reading or writing? The reading section, as I said, you're not going to be asked about anything. You're not, anything about 2 opposing arguments simply in the reading section. In the writing section, you are going to be asked to read 2 opposing arguments and to write down your own extended response. That is that. And now let's go to the next one. The next one is basically going over what we have learned so far about nonfiction texts and what we should focus on during the next 5 days before we move on to the fiction part of reading comprehension of GED RLA. So reading actively. In the first session, we talked about what we are going to be asked during the test. And as I said, this is where we are going to do a bit, like maybe short review of each topic that we have talked about so far. So if this is, or maybe if you're not able to attend these sessions from the beginning, you have a very good luck because we are going to review them a bit. So reading actively. We talked about being active really means ask, not questions. Ask questions. The types of questions that we talked about during one of the previous slides. When you are reading, look for evidence. Read the question. On the page. We said that, okay, ask questions like, what is this text talking about? What is this text telling me? Is there any evidence in the text? Okay, great. Am I supposed to be entertained by this text, or am I supposed to be informed? Am I being persuaded to stop thinking a certain way, or to start believing or thinking in a certain way? When you do that, while doing that, as I said, always read the question in the right section of the page that you are at. during the text. During the test. When you read this question again, you will know what to read for. Always, you are going to be asked questions like, what year did something happen? Or you are going to be reading statements like, okay, true or false. This incident happened this year. You have to have read the text and you have to have knowledge about whether that year, or whether that incident happened in that year. Okay, so, and main idea and supporting details. We talked about main idea being the central idea that holds the whole text together. Meaning that if you remove the main idea of your text, before continuing, if you have any questions, if you have any grammatical questions, because I assume this is the last session of reading nonfiction. If you have any grammatical questions, maybe or anything, that's why we are done with the reading section and analyzing them. I'm just doing the review. And in the meantime, if you have any questions and you feel that those questions need to be addressed, please ask them in the chat box or through the Mentimeter code that I have provided to you. Okay, so main idea and supporting details. We talked about main idea being a statement, a specific statement telling you what this text is about, or what this text is implying, because sometimes main ideas are not directly stated or explicitly phrased. So sometimes main ideas are implied. You'll have to infer what the text is implying. You have to be able to read between the lines by looking at the evidence provided in the text, by looking at examples, explanations, logical reasoning, the word choice. Sometimes you might read about, let's say someone hates, I don't want to give any real person's name. Let's say someone hates a musician. And you read the text, and in some ways, the text looks as if it's trying to inform you, or the purpose of the text is to inform you. But you come across, some words that you find negative. Maybe the author has written something about a song being basic, but getting a lot of response from the audience and becoming a hit. And in that, you can infer that maybe the author does not like the singer. And if you are able to do that, and then you go through the text again and you say, okay, now I know the main idea of this text is not explicitly stated. It's not directly said, but all the evidence provided in the text actually tells me that this singer is not a good singer and does not deserve to be so popular or loved, or whatever term you want to use. Anyway, look for main ideas and supporting details. We know now how to do that. Any statement that is supported by multiple evidence or other statements, either directly or indirectly, is the main idea. We have talked about making connections. Making connections meaning that I said, when you are asked a question based on this text, based on this passage, or no, textual maybe, passage. As soon as you read something like this, or maybe this statement, probably this statement will be written in the question. When you read the question and you have this statement based on this text or based on the passage, when you read that, you have to stop believing, you have to stop remembering what you know or what you knew about the topic before reading the passage. That's when you are asked to answer the question based on the text only. You're not allowed to make any connections. But if you don't read, if the question does not have this sentence, then you can use your external knowledge or outside knowledge and make connections. And because GED, the RLA is not there to question or assess your general knowledge, but it doesn't assume that you don't know anything about the real world as well. It does not do that. So sometimes you are going to have to, or you are going to have to make connections between what's written in the text and the outside world using your own external or general knowledge. So the text structure. We talked about cause and effect. We said that, okay, cause and effect meaning that, okay, this happens because of this. This because of this. Because of. In that, this one is the effect, and this one is the cause. For instance, we are able to communicate, we are able to conduct this GED program remotely because we have the internet. Meaning that the cause of us being able to communicate like this is the internet. Of course, that is not, maybe that is the main cause, but that's not the only cause. The only cause sometimes is non-existent, meaning that, okay, you are only supposed to find out what's written in the text, and the text, it might be written something like, okay, for instance, right now Joe Biden is the president of the United States because he got the most electoral votes during the election. And that is something that you'll have to read for social studies, meaning that, okay, the most popular person does not actually win presidency or the president's position. In the US, person with the most electoral college vote actually gets the presidency. And usually the popular one, the one getting the most popular vote gets the most electoral college vote as well. But I think once or twice this has not happened. Anyway, so the Joe Biden is the president because he got the most electoral college votes. Great. We know the cause and effect relationship. We know compare and contrast. Compare meaning that you get two similar things, and the text actually talks about similarities between two things. Okay, for instance, we say that, okay, Jakarta is similar to Delhi. This is the example that I gave the other day during that session. So maybe we can talk about two people being similar. Okay, they have the same hair color, they have the same eye color, maybe they have the same skin color, they have the same attitude towards world, they have the same philosophy, and then you can basically about similarities. About the contrast section of that is about differences. So you say, okay, you and I are different because you believe that dogs should be kept leashed, while I believe that dogs should be kept unleashed while walking outside of your home. And then you say, okay, you believe that we should not work 5 days a week, but I believe we should. Text like text when you read and you see using this compare and contrast type of structure, then you know that the compare type one talks about similarities and the contrast type talks about differences. The next one was chronological order, meaning that texts where incidents or things that happen are mentioned in the order that they happened, and meaning in order of time. So if, for instance, says, okay, at the age of 5, let's use someone's name, Jim. Maybe at the age of 5, Jim started going to school. At the age of 7, he had to drop out of school because of this illness. At the age of 9, Jim got cancer. At the age of 11, Jim beat cancer. At the age of 13, he got selected as he got selected for a local soccer football team. At the age of 15, became the most popular football player or soccer player in his area, his neighborhood. And at the age of 19, he got signed by Real Madrid, and the rest is history. So these types of texts write about the incidents in the order that they happened, based on time. So if something happens at 12, that incident is mentioned before another incident that happened. For instance, if I write 13, that would be 12, let's call it PM. And then the incident that happened at 3 PM. So this incident is mentioned before this incident. When you read a text that incidents are mentioned in the order that they happened, then you know that that text uses a chronological order, basically an order that is based on time. So the next one is spatial or descriptive structure. So spatial or descriptive, spatial, not special, spatial or descriptive structure actually sets up the scene, the environment, and talks about the space where something takes place. This is usually found in novels. You can find this in novels. You can find this where the writer is setting up an image in your brain to help you understand what the environment of what the scene was. About what the scene was looking like, or what the space around an incident looked like during the incident. Anyway, the next one is sequential order. Sequential order is pretty easy. This is used in teaching books, in guides. Okay, first you do this, second you do this. Okay, if you do the second one before the first one, so then knows you're not going to have the result that you expect. So this is when you know that this text actually uses sequential structure, and everything is written in the based on these steps, based on the steps they need to happen. Anyway, cooking books, great example. Next one is we talked about narrator's point of view or narrator's point of view. Narrator in the US they pronounce as narrator, in the UK they pronounce as narrator. Anyway, both are right. So narrator's point of view, being that when you read a text, you try to make a connection between the text, the incident, and also the narrator, like who is telling this story. This is usually important during reading a novel. So sometimes novels are written about the writer using the word I, okay, the story of, and there is this imaginative person, this made-up character, and the writer, the author, talks about that made-up person, that imaginary person, as if author is that imaginary person, and writes from that person. Then first person author uses I, me, my, mine. And then you have the second person, you. Wow, what are you? You, your, yours. No, yours. And in the third person perspective, from it, when an author writes from a third person perspective, we said that the author uses pronouns he, she, they, and it. He, him, she, her, they, them, it. Anyway, we said that the third person actually has three sections. An author can write from a third person perspective using three methods. Person is like a third person limited. Third person limited meaning that the third person that the author talks about uses they or whatever the pronoun that person is. Limited meaning that the author writes about one person's, even in addition to writing about dialogues and actions, the author writes about thoughts, feelings. Then it's third person limited. Third person, just third person anyway. That is when the author does not talk about anyone's thought, does not talk about any character's thought, and only talks about dialogues and actions. And it's up to the reader to infer from the dialogues and from the actions what the main character is going through or is feeling. And third person omniscient, as we mentioned the other day, meaning all-knowing third person. That's when the author talks about everyone's, in addition to dialogues and actions, everyone's thoughts, feelings, and what any character is going through or goes through at any point. That is third person omniscient. We talked about author's tone. Author's tone means basically what the author feels about any topic, any text that is being presented. We said that an author's tone, basically, or an author's mood, is basically the author's way of kind of implying, even though the text might look like as if it's written from a neutral point of view. The author might use some words that will help you understand what the author really thinks about, or what the author would agree or disagree. This is one of the questions that you had during the submarine, I think. No, you did that on your own. The Library of Alexandria. This is one of the questions that you had. And okay, what statement would the author agree? We talked about purpose of text. This is something that this is from session 6. This is something we talked about in the beginning as well. We talked about purpose of text. Purpose of text, basically, there are 3 purposes: to inform. Some of you were not able to answer the questions properly regarding this. It's fine. To inform, to entertain, and to persuade. We know that. Number 1, to inform, to instruct, to help you understand something, is used in text, or is the type of text that you feel informed after reading it, without getting your opinions, without getting your thoughts, and basically without having any questions about any of the ideologies that you might have. To entertain is you feel entertained. You don't feel as if, you don't feel informed. You just feel, oh, this was fun. Oh, this was sad. No, like movies, and generally speaking. To persuade is when you read a text and you feel as if a text kind of substantiates a belief that you have, or tries to persuade you, from having that belief, try to persuade you to stop having that belief. That's when you know that the text is trying to persuade you, is trying to make you think differently. That is it. And we talked about validity of arguments. So in validity of arguments, we said that, okay, any argument that is supported by multiple evidence is valid. And you can distinguish, or you can determine an argument, a valid argument, from an invalid one, is by looking at the types of evidence provided to support that argument. If the argument, if the main idea of a text is, okay, we should all stop driving cars and we should walk around, that's the argument. And then later on, we said, okay, this is this person's personal feeling. Okay, it's not really great for your health. Walking is really great for your health. And you kind of stops really talking about the main idea. That's when you know that, okay, the main idea of this text was supposed to be we should stop driving and we should start walking around. But all the author talks about is walking around and how good walking around is for you. But we could, drive cars and walk around. Not at the same time, of course, not simultaneously. You could do both of them. Doesn't mean you have to stop it. They know that the argument is invalid when an evidence is not provided. For instance, saying that, okay, using social media is good for your health because you see others' life and you feel inspired, or you could argue the opposite. You could say that social media is really bad for your health, mental health, of course, because, after seeing others happy, because people always try to show off and they post about their happy moments, not when they are miserable or when they feel bad. And you might be at a very bad state when you see those, people having fun and having great lives, that you might consider your life a misery. Those arguments. And then you should look for evidence. If someone says, okay, social media is bad, is there any evidence for that? Because to be honest, social media is bad for your health. Up until this point, it's just an opinion. Scientifically, there have been some research, but it's not, widely researched. And in some countries, you'll have no idea what social media is. So anyway, validity of arguments basically means looking at how an argument is supported, what types of evidence are provided, and if you cannot find valid evidence or credible evidence for the argument, then that means that that argument is invalid. Next one is related text. This is today's topic, and two opposing texts. This is something that we talk about today, so I don't think I need to go over it again. That is it. This is everything that we have learned so far, and now I'm going to tell you a bit about how to use them during the test. Is this next slide? No. Okay, let's say you have a text, and it's a nonfiction text, because we have learned about nonfiction only up to now. So it's a nonfiction text. You read this. Great. Okay, do it actively. Use this strategy. Great. And if you can see the question, read the question. Sometimes it's good to read the answers as well. Sometimes it's not. If the question is specific, like what year did something happen, by reading closely, sometimes if you don't understand it, it's okay to read again as long as you have time. Because time management is really important, which is something we'll talk about maybe in the last session. Or maybe before that. We'll talk about that again, but up to now, use this one, this strategy, reading closely. Okay, read closely, understand it, read the question. If the question is about a year, about an incident happening at a specific time, or about someone doing a specific thing or having a specific job, then you know that that question's answer is only one statement in the passage or in the text. If it's about a year, let's say Einstein went to the US at the age of 50, is the statement true or false? Or at what age did Einstein go to the US? If this is the question, and then you see the answers, okay, 50, 45, 67, 73, 135, anyway, whatever. When you read that, you know that, okay, there is a statement in the passage telling us when Einstein, or at what age Einstein went to the US. And be careful. If sometimes, let's say I don't know the birth year of Einstein, but I can certainly say that it was in the 19th century. I think so. So let's say Einstein was born 18, if you know this, please let me know. 1889. So Einstein was born, let's say, for instance, in 1889. And the text says that, okay, in 1937, Einstein went to the US. And then when you read the question does not have any year. The question has age. If Einstein was born in 1889 up until 1937, so 11, the age of 48, if you read this one, right? Then you know that Einstein actually went to the US at the age of 48. You have ages here. Basically, questions that ask you about a specific year, a specific time, a specific number, a specific incident, a specific belief of someone or a specific dialogue, that's when you know that you can find the answer by just reading, of course. By just sometimes you can, find out what the answer is just by skimming through the text. Skimming meaning that reading really quickly while looking for specific things. Like when you read this question, you can say, okay, traveling to TS. Then you go through the text. Okay, here's year 1937. Oh, and then you can see an age. Okay, Einstein was born in 1889. And then you do that, do the math, 48, and then okay, option B. Great. Now that's when you have a specific question that can be answered by one statement or one sentence in the passage. Okay, the question is, what is the main idea of the text? This is something that you need to have understood everything that's said in the text, or in the passage that you have on your screen. Main idea. Okay, great. Okay, what text structure is used in this text? Okay, you can see the first paragraph. Okay, talks about cause and effect. Okay, this caused that. Okay, this caused that. Okay, great. This one talks about comparing and contrasting. Okay, great. And then you read all of that, and then at the end of this, sometimes the whole text uses only one text structure, and sometimes one passage can use or can have multiple text structures. So you have read the passage, and now you know what the text says. Ask yourself a question. If this text were a person talking to me and explaining everything orally, what would this person, or what question is this person answering? Or would this person have been answering to make it grammatically correct? Anyway, so you ask questions like, okay, what is this text telling me? Is this it? And then after you have settled on a main idea, after maybe you have come to the conclusion that this is the main idea, look for evidence. Find out supports. See if the evidence provided in the text actually supports the statement that you think is the main idea. If the main idea is explicitly, directly stated, then easy. Sometimes the main idea is not, and you have to read the whole text and look at the evidence provided in the text to see what the main idea is. Anyway, you have done that. Okay, great. Specific questions, easy. Main idea, okay. Find out supporting details. Oh, why did I circle that? Supporting details. Make connections if the question does not say based on the text. So narrator's point of view or narrator's point of view. Okay, who is actually narrating this story? What is the narrative of this story? What is this story saying? And who is telling this story? Then you know that, okay, if this person is talking about himself or herself or himself, and you know that, okay, great. This person. There are questions like, okay, who is telling this story? And then at some point in the text, you might, okay, my grandma called me, John, come here. I went to grandma, and then, and then oh, John is the narrator's name, and John is telling his own story in this text. Anyway, writer's tone, you look at word choice, you look at purpose of text again. Do you feel informed? Do you feel entertained? Do you feel as if you are being asked to believe in a certain way. Related text to opposing arguments. Easy reading and analyzing nonfiction is done. We will have some really important practices coming up. Be ready for that. And if you don't have any questions now and later on you might have questions, go to Mentimeter and write down this code and ask your questions there. If you have any questions right now, I don't see any question in the chat. I hope that's a good sign. That is, next one is reading fiction text. And we are going to talk about theme, we're going to talk about poems, we're going to talk about poetry, we're going to talk about settings, characters, everything. And this is the end of session 7. I hope you all know by now what to look for during reading a nonfiction text and what to do.
All right. Thank you very much to our facilitator for the comprehensive explanation. We found it valuable and also insightful as well. And thank you so much, everyone, for sharing wonderful trivia to our social media platforms. And now, do you want to develop more brilliant ideas with a platform like this? It's easy as ABC. You can simply go to our website at www.atmerica.or.id, select Write an Event, and go to Collaborate with us. All given proposals will be reviewed and your event might be featured soon. You can also subscribe to our newsletter if you find yourself enjoying this event so you can stay updated with our upcoming events as well. Follow us on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at ATAmerica for interesting contents, giveaways, and so much more. Also, click the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel. With that, my name is Sasna. See you on the next At America event. Bye bye, everybody.